Welcome, everybody. Glad to see you all here. I'm Sean, co-founder and board director of Circle and founder of the Rally Lab venture group. I'm excited to talk about UX because of the two things that I think are holding back USDC and Web3 in general from broader adoption. I think it's regulatory policy and user experience. And I think we recognize generally the benefits of blockchain technology and USDC, but for most people, it's actually a lot worse than centralized solutions because of the UX. It's like we've created these, these protocols that offer a lot of value, but we sort of created HTTP without any viable web browsers for people to figure out how to use them. It's a pretty clunky experience. Worse than clunky, it's actually scary for a lot of people. And it's not just a client tier thing, I think it's a web tier thing as well. So I'm really excited to explore solutions to this space and figure out how to make it, hopefully 10x better. Right now it's about half as good for a lot of people. So I'm excited to be joined by two founders who are really leading innovative solutions in this area. And the first I want to introduce to the stage is Teymour Farman-Farmaian. Teymour is co-founder and CEO of Slide, a company that recently raised $12 million to make Web3 effortless for dApps and everyday users. Before Slide, Teymour was on the product team at Coinbase. Yeah, that's right. We'll just read your wonderful bio. He was at the product team at Coinbase where he launched crypto simplifying products with tens of millions in annual revenue. He's been active in crypto since 2015, which is like 50 years in crypto, dog years or something, and previously held product and strategy roles at Instacart and others. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Nice to see you, everyone. Thank you for coming.
I also want to welcome remotely our friend Mike Hudack, who is the founder and CEO of Avian Labs, which is working in stealth on an exciting crypto finance product. Hopefully he can tease a little bit of what he's been doing. His deep experience in designing products for mainstream consumer groups and also with the bizarre inner workings of traditional finance, as he was previously chief product officer at Monzo Bank. Before that, he was chief product officer CTO at Deliveroo, and previously he was product leader at Facebook, where he worked on identity and also ran Facebook's ad and sharing products. And as an entrepreneur founder, he created an internet video company called Blip, which is now part of the Walt Disney Company. Welcome, Mike, from England. Mike, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you from my computer.
Okay, great. So I thought first we'd just start with framing the problem a little bit, guys. We look at, well, I guess first of all, I'm going to use the word Web3. I have some ambivalence about that word myself, but it's just a word that we can use. And when I use that word, I mean it as a little bit broader than just crypto alone. So, Web3 experiences, decentralized internet technologies, this next phase of the internet that we're all building. But when we look at, crypto or Web3 today, we see a lot of value, as I was saying, created at the protocol layers. But when it comes to user-centric or human-centric design of the ways of interacting and engaging with these layers, what are the problems that you guys outline and the things that you think about as you're thinking about product solutions? Maybe Teymour, we'll start with you first.
Yeah, of course. So I think there are a number of different issues that everyday users will face, or also crypto natives will face in interacting with crypto and Web3 right now. Just kind of following the user journey, I normally look at simplifying the user journey into maybe a couple different steps. The first of which is user is acquiring crypto. The second one of which is where they are then custodying and storing that crypto or crypto asset, maybe an NFT. And then on an ongoing basis, their transaction and their interaction with different applications. So they are now going to use their crypto within the context of Web3. So then to follow that journey, I think there are just a number of different pain points that come up for a user. So a user will have to set up an exchange account, maybe with a Coinbase account. They're going to have to buy their crypto, wait 7 days to withdraw. When they get to their custody, they're going to have to set up a non-custodial wallet. They'll have to do their research there. They're going to install an extension, deal with their seed phrase, get their public address, send their funds over. This is arduous, complicated, difficult. So now they already have relationships with two different entities. Oftentimes, they then have to go and bridge between different applications. We are increasingly in a multi-chain world. You have applications that are based on different chains, and so users will have to figure out that they'll have to kind of go and actually connect to these third-party bridges and then send their funds through a complicated bridging process, which is, as you mentioned, not just complicated, but even scary for many of the users that we've talked to. Then there are just a number of other things I could keep on rambling on. You have chain-specific tokens. Every single blockchain accepts a different token for payment. So you have to pay the blockchain to accept your transactions. That is a different payment than the one that you're going to make to the NFT marketplace or to the game. So now you're managing two different tokens, and that token, the second token, changes every time you move from chain to chain. So these are just some of the many different issues. I can ramble on and on and on, but they are very complicated and numerous. So,
yeah, Mike, what are your thoughts on this? Let's just get all the pain out in the open so that we know what we're trying to solve for.
I think it's even worth taking a step back and saying, well, people are willing to deal with an almost infinite amount of pain if you create an almost infinite amount of value for them. Those things just have to be in equilibrium. And right now, I think crypto creates a lot of value for a small number of people through speculation and other use cases like that. But in order to be useful and create real value in real people's lives, in a lot of the use cases that we've talked about, that we think about crypto changing the world, payments, storing value, digital collectibles, I think you have to have an experience which is truly seamless and like Web2, really, really easy to use. And right now it feels a little bit like, using a command line. It's like you have to learn Bash, you have to install a Chrome plugin. My mother-in-law would really benefit from USDC and being able to move money seamlessly to her son in Connecticut, but she's not going to download a Chrome plugin and pay 4% to an on-ramp provider and copy and paste a long wallet address in order to do that. It's easier to just use her bank or use Wise or something like that. And I think that's what we need to think about. Like, how do we make this easier? And I think you have to solve all of the problems that Teymour is talking about. You have to make all of those fade away. You can't expect my mother-in-law to look at a long wallet address even, much less think about, what she's supposed to do with a 12-word mnemonic. Yeah.
When you guys think about the current things that we do as people who are accustomed to interacting with crypto, today, you sort of assume, okay, first you get Chrome, you have some add-ins, you have, you divide your attention across a dozen tabs that are doing different things, all that are using the same or other plugins, mobile apps, even from the same companies that don't really seamlessly, sort of dividing your attention across a lot of different things. How much of the problem is actually the browser problem and the add-in thing? Do we need a new super app Web3 browser experience, or is it just more? Do you think more about unbundling certain experiences, making individual things better? How do you think about that?
Yeah. I think there are certain experiences that lend better to different interfaces, you could say. I think there are certain experiences that probably are best aggregated and put into maybe the super app type environment where you bring more and more value. And so even just if we're to focus on crypto alone, for instance, there are a number of kind of core, even just at DeFi, there are a number of core verbs, as we call them at Coinbase, is just kind of the number of actions that a user might want to do, whether this is borrow, lend, earn yield, trade, these kinds of things. These lend well to an experience that is possibly more aggregated and that can bring more and more of those functions into one common place. I think there are other experiences that are that lend a little bit less well to being aggregated, to being put into one place. These are more like maybe feature-rich and experience-rich applications. So for instance, games, NFT marketplaces, those that really invest in the experience themselves and that I think lend less well to being aggregated and constrained into common experiences. And so I think it does depend. There are certain cases where you want to aggregate and have super apps of sorts, and certain cases where I think you want to have kind of these standalone separate experiences that are dictated and driven by the developers of those experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mike, what are your thoughts?
I don't think it matters that much, to be honest with you. I think you can ship an app. I think you can ship a web page. I think even a browser plugin under certain circumstances can be fine. It's just you have to hide the complexity. You need to hide the complexity in a way which is safe, which is a very, very, very difficult thing to do. I don't think that one delivery technology versus another makes that particularly, easier or harder.
Yeah, one of the things I think about even as a developer is that you're sort of developing an app that sits in these experiences, but you're using the same JavaScript libraries. Often they're targeting the same web tier, so everyone is importing Web3.js or Ethers.js or whatever it is, targeting Infura or Alchemy, every single tab is doing exactly the same thing. And a modern browser does provide me things like, okay, it understands HTTPS and SSL certs. It understands things like, bookmarking, and there's just things that a browser does for me. Will there ultimately be a new container and sort of attached web tier and maybe cross-chain smart contracts that create the experience that people can target? Or is that too much to ask for? Will we have sort of an iPhone moment and we're in the BlackBerry era? And then all of a sudden there is this new experience that really is the thing that captures the imagination of the mainstream. Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, I think there'll be an iPhone moment. It's not entirely clear what it is, but yeah, there'll be a moment where there's something new that uses Web3 technology to deliver value that people didn't know was possible, perhaps, in a way which is really easy for them to understand. And I do think that will come in probably in a somewhat different form factor. Like, I do think that's unlikely to come in a Chrome plugin, for example.
Yeah. Question for you, Teymour. One of the things that I hear often in the crypto communities, we have a very engineering-driven ecosystem. Engineering and market-driven ecosystem. Some would say policy-driven as well, but not really design-driven or UX-driven, at least to this point. And when I worked on early internet standards, many years ago, we had engineers who were working on, TCP/IP, HTTP. What are the standards around document delivery and how websites would work? And they really didn't give a shit about UX, to be honest with you. They were sort of like, why would somebody who signed up for AOL ever need to use my stuff? I hear an echo of that in some spaces in crypto. It's like, why is this? This is just a front-end problem. Designers will figure it out. It's just UI, not UX. What's your take on that? Do you hear those overtones from,
Yeah, definitely. I think historically, a number of the people who were most attracted to crypto and those who were already using the space were those who were tech forward. The people who were attracted to building in the space earlier on were those who were deeply technical and who had this broader vision, but who were really focused on the technicals and then serving what really at the beginning were pretty technical products as well. If you just look at DeFi products, these are products that for the most part are not those that everyday users are seeking out to go and use. That has changed, and I think it depends on the question of like how important is it to be focused on design or user experience as opposed to the underlying technology. I think it's really a question of who are we trying to address with what we're building here. If we are, historically we've been content with building for what I would call a much smaller subset of the population. Building for those who are technically inclined, who are willing to go through the steps to go and use these applications. I think if we are hoping to expand our addressable market, if we're hoping to reach new sets of users, then we have to inevitably cater to those users, and we have to kind of meet the users with their needs and build for those. So I think in doing so, it doesn't mean that we minimize the technology. It doesn't mean that we no longer focus on the technical innovation, but I think it means that we can expand our thinking to also include how we can innovate on the UX and the design side as well.
Yeah. All right. So we sort of complained about a bunch of things and put some problems out there. Let's sort of shift this discussion a little bit to solutions and how we sort of envision the solutions. And maybe you start first with payments, because when Jeremy and I started Circle 9 years ago, we kind of assumed that payments was the obvious use case that would take hold first. We imagined that over time we'd have things like complicated lending markets and composable finance and these things. We thought for sure payments would come first because it's the most obvious in simple use case, and yet hasn't really happened, either in B2B payments or in B2C or remittance, whatever way you want to look at it. While some of these other things in crypto really took off faster than we expected, honestly. And of course, some of the UX issues were around things like volatility, which is one of the reasons that we developed USDC. But by and large, stable coins or crypto in general, it just has not really taken hold in the payment space, even though it stands to be more inclusive, further reaching, faster settlement times, less expensive, and on and on and on. Mike, what are your thoughts on the solution that finally gets us there? What does it kind of look like?
I think it looks a lot like a traditional finance app that uses crypto for the things that it's really great at. And one of those things is instant settlement. Another is really broad compatibility. The idea that anybody can download this thing and they can get started and they don't have to worry about where they are or what jurisdiction they're in, maybe at the beginning. But I think, this sort of works today. Like, we can install MetaMask and like on-ramp some USDC and I can send it to you. But right now, for that to work, you have to send me your wallet address, your ENS. I need to pay like 3.5% to, in some cases, to buy the USDC. There's all of this cruft in between. I think the actual pure experience is you download an app, you import your address book, you tap on a person, you say how much money you want to send them. Maybe you can express that in any currency and it just resolves down to something like USDC and then it goes to them, whether or not they're on the platform. And I think there are now technologies that make every single part of that possible. You also obviously have to hook up into the fiat world in order for that to work. So you need on-ramping that works with one of those people, which I think, again, it's possible to build right now. All of those things exist in the world today. They've all been built. If we think about the work that's been done in crypto so far, like the infrastructure to do this exists. But the final work to shape this into something that anybody in the world can use, that any of 1 billion people could just like install the app and use, and it feels familiar and easy and safe on day one. That hasn't been done yet, but I think in some ways that's the easy part.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, even if I'm just trying to send you dollars, I know you're in England, but just say you don't want, you probably really don't want the pound these days anyway, but you just want dollars. Do you even need to know that it's USDC? If it transfers?
I don't think you do. I think that you need to know. I think that whatever platform is providing the service, whatever app's providing the service, has an obligation to tell the user what's actually moving under the hood, because that's important information for them. If, for example, there are large currency movements, they need to know what they're getting into. But I don't think that the user needs to know that at all, really.
Yeah.
Beyond that one thing.
Yeah. How about, Teymour, how about decentralization? This is the thing that always comes up. When we're talking about payments, Mike was mentioning, there are things that we do need to hook into the existing, cranky fiat world that we're ultimately, the ultimate idea is that you never really need to cash out of something like USDC. You just have USD and it's on chains and it moves seamlessly across chains and all that. But right now, you certainly need to connect into the fiat world, even to get sort of bootstrapped and onboarded into this space. And buy your milk and pay your taxes for now, for the most part. But how important is the idea of decentralization over time, and sort of also help us out with this concept of Web 2.5 and the sort of hybrid approaches to these things? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think decentralization is of course very important, and it is. We have. Crypto and Web3 are no longer monoliths. We are no longer just serving one group of people with one set of needs. So I think it's important that we have solutions that kind of address the various sets of needs that different sets of users might have. So to answer the decentralization point, I think it's important that the underlying technology, the blockchain technology that's actually powering these experiences is decentralized, is very decentralized, and gives us the optionality such that users and use cases who want to make use of that and for whom that's critically important can default to that as kind of their base case. I also, though, am aware of the fact that if you ask most new users to crypto and Web3, how much they care about decentralization, or whether even if they know what decentralization even means, you get very different answers than those that you get from those who are, very crypto native and very focused on this. And so I think there's really a need for a spectrum of different solutions. As you've said, one of the biggest places where decentralization just becomes really challenging is wherever you touch the fiat world. So a lot of people, for instance, rag on my former employer Coinbase for being very not decentralized. But Coinbase also has done, I'd say, very positive things for the space writ large, and this is evidenced by the fact that they have 100 million users and 100 million users plus, who many of whom don't actually aren't actually here for the term decentralization and who are really, who benefit from decentralization, but themselves don't need to actually understand that and don't need to see that on like the UX level. So, yeah, and again, I think anytime you're touching the fiat world is where this also gets very dicey. So yes, to answer then the question on Web 2.5, I think these experiences are important. They're not for everyone. These aren't the experiences that those who are deeply invested in self-sovereignty and who and complete and ultimate ownership themselves, for instance, they might not gravitate to these experiences as much. But as we reach larger and larger demographics and new user segments, then we are going to have to. Then I think Web 2.5 and kind of and adding these bridges, these real world to crypto bridges, I think are going to be really important. And so we see them as a critical part of how the space moves forward.
Mike, what are your thoughts, Mr. Web 2.5?
I don't think it matters for 99.9% of the people in the world, except maybe in how it might produce value for them. Like, I think it's nice, this idea that you can take your wallet and you can bring it to any provider in the world. And I can just take my wallet, I can take it out of one piece of software, I can put it into another and have a different on-ramp, have a different off-ramp, have a different experience. I think that might be value for people, but I don't think decentralization is value for people. I think censorship resistance might be value to society. I think it might also be difficult for society to swallow in certain circumstances. There are censorship is important to society in some areas, and we should acknowledge that. I think these things are not they're philosophical views as much as they are actual user value, and they're important to me, and they're important, I imagine, to most of the people who are here. But for 99.9% of our future users, the billions of people who are going to be using Web3 or crypto or whatever we want to call it, I think it's of marginal consideration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the way I look at it is I think the important things, movement of money, censorship-resistant voting, the important things need to be decentralized. Yep. And then there are other things that are important to a user experience that just function better when there's some element of centralization, like dealing with latency, for example. And turns out everyone hosting their individual node introduces a lot of latency and performance issues, and even companies don't want to host their own nodes. That's why they use the cloud. So some mix is right, but the important things need to be decentralized. Otherwise, gatekeepers tend to emerge and charge fees one way or another, or productize our personal data one way or another. Power tends to want to centralize, so the sort of powerful, important elements ought to be,
I think that's right. I think you want to decompose this into the features that you want to offer somebody through something like decentralization. What is the benefit you want to create for user and society? And that will guide you to where it's important to have decentralization in your product and where it's okay to centralize.
Yeah. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit to NFTs, because one of the things that I like about NFTs and collectibles is that unlike some more mainstream or consumer-oriented finance use cases that leverage crypto, maybe under the covers, people who are just getting into Web3 first through NFTs are kind of okay with the presence of crypto. It doesn't need to necessarily be hidden. It just needs to be better and easier to use and not be, disjointed or scary. So, Teymour, I know you and Slide have done a lot of thinking about a smoother, improved experience for even simply acquiring an NFT. Walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, at Slide, we want to make, what are we doing at Slide? At Slide, we're making Web3 effortless for dApps, so Web3 applications and everyday users. We want to be able to enable any user, regardless of their crypto background, to be able to onboard themselves to use any application as seamlessly as they do in Web2. So with that context, specifically around NFTs, we want to make these experiences as seamless as possible. As you mentioned, some people who are interested in buying NFTs are actually interested in the underlying, the other aspects of that experience, including maybe the more crypto side of this experience. We see our role as broadly to make things as simple as possible so that we can cater to the lowest common denominator, such that any user doesn't have to have any context or any knowledge or really have to care at all about the underlying rails. They can just show up and be beneficiaries and purchase NFTs. But that we also see our offering as kind of like a a Russian doll of sorts where you can continually unpack and go deeper and deeper if you'd like. We want to be able to grow with our users. We want to be able to cater to, again, the lowest common denominator who don't care and maybe don't have the ability to go as deep, while also making it, again, accessible for users who do want to learn more and kind of unpack a little bit more, that they can go and learn more about that.
Yeah, I think we may have a demo also.
Yeah, I'm happy to pull that up. There's a kind of a stylized demo of what we're doing that we can show. This is just from our site, but like basically what we want to show here is that with Slide, it should be really extremely effortless to show up and buy an NFT. This should really resemble a Web 2 level of ease in purchasing an NFT. You see here is that we're looking kind of different sites where crypto or NFTs might be purchased, and then a user can just cash out directly from their crypto back to their bank account or to their card payment of choice, their fiat payment method of choice. So we really want to enable every application to have this experience where any user can show up and have no context and just onboard themselves and just get going immediately and effortlessly. So yeah.
Right, it's in your onboarding here using Web 2 socials as well. So.
Yes, we use a number of different ways of authenticating and getting users onboarded. We have, let's call it like the more common ways of whether you use email or social login to instantiate a wallet with us and to get going. But then we can also, of course, then take full custody and take reveal your private key and then go. And if you want to follow a more crypto native path.
Very cool, very cool. All right, let's just maybe talk for a couple minutes here about risk. Because one of the things I think is different about a lot of Web3 apps, whether it's a game or a marketplace or DeFi experience, whatever, is this idea that end users need to make more complicated risk decisions than users tend to have to make in Web2 apps, because in Web2 situation, they kind of delegate a lot of risk decisions to whoever that central gatekeeper is. But if I'm my own bank, if I'm my own custodian, and one way or another, I'm executing a lot of fairly complicated risk decisions that can be kind of confusing. And I think the default experience for a lot of people is they're just asked to prove ownership of a key by signing some sort of message, which is just scary as hell for a lot of people. Am I losing my money? Am I accidentally sending my ape to, to some pool that I didn't mean, et cetera, et cetera. How do you think about user experience, incorporating risk decisions, and even maybe touching on identity and sort of making sure that you're the guy that I'm trying to send money to? How do you think about just risk decisions in the fabric of user experiences? Maybe Mike, we'll start with you first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth contrasting the way that this works in the UK in fiat and how it works in crypto. So, there are scam calls here all the time where people call up and they pretend to be, HMRC, the IRS, and they say, hey, you owe us a 2,000 pound fine or whatever. And they are incredibly convincing, and they convince a lot of people. It's called APP fraud. They convince a lot of people to send the money. It happens all the time. There's a voluntary program in the UK that banks are all signed up to because the regulators tell them that they should, with a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. That says that if the scam is sophisticated, your bank will reimburse you. And so if you get a call tomorrow and somebody convinces you that they're the IRS and you transfer them a bunch of money, you can call up the bank and get your money back. Whereas, with Web3, if I sign a contract that I don't understand and my wallet goes and does a bunch of stuff and it's drained, I'm out of luck. It's all gone. And I had no hope of understanding what was going on in that contract as a regular user. And so from an ordinary person's perspective, it's frightening, not just because it looks scary, but because it actually is. And I think that we need to build products and build technologies that solve those problems for people, that make clear what the contract does. And maybe the wallet has some sort of a reputation system associated with it. I think one of the reasons why we started building what we're building at Avian, which involves identity in the payments flows, because I had this experience of signing up. A friend of mine created a DAO to buy some land in Montana, and he asked me if I wanted to join, and I was like, sure. And in order to do it, I had to buy a bunch of USDC on Coinbase, transfer it into a phantom wallet to wrap it in Solana, and then I transfer it to a random wallet address that I copied out of a Google Doc that he had sent me, And I'm texting him and I'm asking, is this the right address? Have you gotten it? And it's kind of terrifying, even though the transaction itself happens almost instantly, right? Imagine if that took longer. I mean, thank God it happened so quickly, because I then knew whether or not I lost my money or not. I think it's crazy that we send money to, it's like DNS has never been invented, and we have ENS, but we get an ENS and it can say anything. I think identity is one of the most interesting problems in crypto, in finance, and anything. I mean, the amount of money which is lost from people sending to the wrong person, it's just massive. And, in Web3 now, we have a bunch of technologies that are actually really amazing in terms of allowing people to bring their identity online, prove they are who they say they are in a decentralized way. And I think there is going to be a real renaissance at the point that, that is actually brought forth to a large number of people, wrapped in a UI and an experience and a design that they can understand and they can use. I think it's going to be transformative. Mm-hmm. I don't think that we're, because it's decentralized, because we want to be decentralized, I think it's going to be very difficult to guarantee that the people that you're sending money to are actually, HMRC, or Sean, that it's actually you. But I think there are products that you can build that make a series of assertions that, that can be independently verified, where you can give people a really good idea of whether or not it's the right person. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to be really critical for mainstream adoption of, blockchain-based payments.
Yeah, Teymour, I want to get your thoughts on this too, and then I think we'll, maybe see if we can get some questions as well from people here in the audience. But, just on the topic of identity, we have things now. Vitalik earlier was talking about, just mentioned soulbound tokens. We have things like, social tokens, reputation tokens attached to things like blockchain domain names or accounts. We have verifiable credentials. We have the decentralized identity side of things. What do you think clicks for a more mainstream user experience around any of this, around crypto finance, around games, et cetera?
Yeah, I think identity is one of the things that Web3 brings as a benefit, but that isn't going to be the thing that brings people to Web3, if that makes sense. So I see it as, as Mike was talking about, that there's this very strong need in the case of Mike's business of people sending money to one another. And that people will come for that. But then there will be expectations when they come to that there is a really seamless experience and that certain kind of identity considerations are taken into account. I think similarly, people will not come to other Web3 experiences on the basis of having better identity management. I think they will come. This will be something that will be a huge benefit that will accompany their experiences within the space, is my take on identity. However, there are very, very tangible and material benefits that come with identity in Web3. So you were mentioning some of the innovations in the space. I think one of the things that users really are yearning for, and that we just see again and again with the hacks and privacy issues that you've had again and again in Web 2, and all these discussions that have really come to the fore in the past years, is about sharing one's information and who do you trust with your information and how do you safeguard your personal information. And Web3 offers really elegant native ways of doing this well and managing your own data, sharing your data selectively or not sharing it, or even attesting that you are who you are without even having to share that data, and having kind of zero knowledge ways of showing that I am who I am. I am, this user who has a sufficient balance to make the transaction, or I am, I've been KYC'd. I am a trusted entity. I'm not a bot, without necessarily needing to divulge personal information that I wouldn't necessarily otherwise want to do. So those are some of my thoughts on the issue.
Yeah. Do you think crypto wallets become identity wallets?
I do think we will tend in that direction, where you will have more and more. Right now, a user's digital identity is pretty, I hate to say decentralized, but pretty spread out across the experiences that they are interacting with in Web 2. And so different applications hold different portions of their identity. Some of those are now being collected at the sign-in with Google level, sign-in with Facebook level, like these kinds of things, but they are still pretty distributed. I think Web 3 and especially with wallets is you'll bring more of that identity within the wallet and within that experience, and then you as the user will selectively grant access to different data points as you see fit, or as you would like to, or as you would not like to. So I do think we will tend in that direction.
Great. All right. Well, let's get to some questions. Maybe one last question from me before we open it up a little bit. Give us a controversial opinion or something that you find yourself, having to convince others of in this space. UX for Web3 or crypto. What's the thing that's going to seem really obvious in retrospect when we're talking? We're having a drink years from now, and we're going to be like, remember that thing we had to convince people? And I'll tell you what, one of mine. I have several, even USDC itself, but I have one related to this topic while you're thinking about that. Which is that, when I started building software, all the user experiences, all the UIs, all the UXs were all built by engineers. There's just no concept of someone who specialized in user-centric or human-centric design, Donald Norman and others notwithstanding. This just wasn't somebody you would have on a team. And of course, companies like Apple changed all of that. And now it's almost taken for granted that you don't have your engineers necessarily crafting UX. That's basically what we do have, though, today, for the most part, in Web3. So my thing is, when it comes to forming teams, entrepreneurs, founders, teams scaling up in this space, it's look for that talent that is user-centric, human-centric, product design talent to augment, obviously the brilliant engineering and sales and marketing, et cetera, talent that you also need. So Mike, give us something a little spicy or controversial that you got.
First of all, I really agree with you. My co-founder is a designer, and our first 7 people are all human-centered engineers who built a bank that got to like 12% of the UK population, adult population, by being easier to use and more human-centered than all the other banks here. So, that's been our singular focus. I really agree with that. Mine is, I think unhosted wallets are going to go mainstream. I think everybody in the world is going to have one. I think that self-custody is real value for people, and that there are problems that need to be solved there, but they will be solved. And that 10 years from now, everybody will look back and think it's really weird that they ever would have stored their identity with some central Google and trusted them to do that. It's going to be bizarre. People want to be in control of their data.
Yeah. Teymour, what have we got? I agree with that, Mike.
I think that, I agree with Mike, and I think that almost everyone, if not everyone, will have a wallet, and the wallet will become, a core part of someone's digital experience. I think if you follow, I believe that we will have more wallet experiences that are embedded within applications, and more custody that happens experientially within an application and not as a standalone separate experience that users have to install and they have to deal with separate from the applications that they're interacting with. If you follow the way that we interact in Web2 is we just go to the destination site, we go to the application that we want to interface with. We don't have that experience and then a separate experience the way we do in crypto or Web3 to manage our wallet and then or manage our assets and sign transactions and then actually interact with the application that we're trying to interact with. So I believe the path dependency, this historical path dependency of crypto kind of evolved into us having these standalone wallets and wanting to take full self-custody and having these things be really separate. And I believe that we will find a place where more and more of these experiences is that where the custody is within the application itself and a user isn't even necessarily aware of the fact that there's this, kind of think of as this as a standalone experience, and they will have this streamlined, embedded, all-in-one experience.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. So do we have some questions? What did we miss? What should we be talking about? Anybody have a question they'd like to ask of really any of us? Yeah. I can't really see, but
I can get the mic to you. Actually, just to that last point, do you think that by doing that, it sacrifices some of the benefits of crypto in general and having a wallet, the fact that you can bounce from app to app with one wallet, just using this sort of connect workflow, whereas if every app custodies your account, you're forced to sort of transfer assets from account to account?
Yeah, great question, and I will clarify that I am not a fan of the siloed custody. I think a potential failure mode that we have in Web3, which I've observed, is that you have the custody is actually specific to the application. And so that I don't think is a good place to go. I think that means that you then have assets siloed all over the place. You're sending them back and forth. That's not a good experience. To clarify, there's this is what we are working on at Slide, is there's a middle ground where you have your custody that's embedded in an experience level. You experience your custody within the application, but that custody is application agnostic. And so your assets are shared across any application that you interact with. But you don't have to install this extension. You don't have to have this separate experience. It feels embedded, even though the custody, your assets are shared across experiences.
Good question.
Hi. Yeah. So one of the things that I'm sort of hearing here is this idea that there's a user. Is it possible to think about sort of big user groups? And I'm thinking about something like the people who upload photos to Instagram, the sort of creator economy. I mean, Web 2 created a creator economy, but it kind of forgot the economy bit of that. So, if there are 50 million, 100 million people who are active in that, is that enough to sort of drive this? And do they have a sufficiently different use case there versus sort of immediately jumping to the 3-5 billion people who are connected to the internet?
Yeah, maybe Mike, that.
Yeah.
Able to hear that.
I guess like one way to think about where we are now is this kind of like post iPhone App Store launch moment where it's like, wow, there's this really cool thing. There's a computer in your pocket. You can now install, you can like write apps that can do almost anything and can take advantage of, I don't know, the accelerometer, GPS, and connectivity all the time. What are people going to use it for? And of course, there are individually addressable user groups, and there are all sorts of niches. And now we know that there are apps that might only appeal to like a few thousand people, but are very, very successful using that set of building blocks that emerged at that time. And then there are other things that are truly universal, where like everybody uses messages of some form or another on their phone. Everybody uses maps of some form or another on their phone. All these things are also going to be true for crypto. I think the reason why we're having this conversation in a way is because we're just at this moment where people don't really know how to use this. They don't really know how to make it user friendly. And the first set of apps, my mother-in-law looks at it and like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. What's this mnemonic thing, right? But yeah, I think that those, 40 million people, 50 million people there, 10,000 people there, billion people there, all have individually addressable needs and economies that can be created with this set of technologies, without a doubt. And, we can start in any of those places. Yeah. My personal attraction is always to like the largest possible set of users, but amazing things will be built for 1,000 people too.
Yeah. Maybe one final question. We can squeeze one last quick one in. There's one right over there.
Hi, I'm building a Web3 online live music platform. So because of the type of the applications, we first built like iOS app. And I see there's like NFT and crypto and integration of that. That's like a lot of the user experience issues. So mostly nowadays, all the Web3 app is built on the website, and we talk about all this UX issue. How do you think about like actual mobile apps playing into this game?
Yeah, so I think the question was, how do you think about mobile apps specifically?
On mobile, I think we've been Web3, most of the experiences have been desktop based. I think we will move the same way we did with Web 2 from desktop to mobile experiences, very pro mobile, very bullish on mobile. My personal belief is that we'll see, the next game that takes off and has 100 million users on it will like very possibly be mobile, and we'll just have more and more of those experiences. And so this is something that we focus a lot on as well at Slide.
Yeah, one of the key things I think with mobile is synchronizing those experiences so that, if we're going to talk about 1 billion users in Web3, and one of the things I talk about at Circle is 1 billion users in Web3, $1 trillion USDC market cap. So we get that to that place over 4 or 5 years. We've got to have seamless experiences across mobile and web and standalone as well. So yeah, I know we're just a little over time here. So I want to make that maybe the closing remark and thank both of you so much for joining this conversation, and thank everybody for joining as well.